Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something I've always found profoundly unsettling. It's the legend surrounding an iconic horror film, Poltergeist.
Oh, yeah, a classic.
Absolutely. But it's not just famous for the scares, is it? It's forever linked to something, well, darker. The Poltergeist Curse.
That's right, the curse. It's almost as famous as the movie itself now.
Exactly. For decades, you hear these persistent, really unsettling rumors about real-life tragedies, strange things happening to the cast and crew. It sort of blurs the lines between the movie's fiction and, a terrifying reality. It's this narrative that just refuses to die down.
Covered everywhere, news, film historians debate it. It's really cemented in pop culture.
So what I'm hoping we can do today is really peel back the layers, look at the facts you've gathered from the sources. We want to explore why this cursed narrative got so strong, why it's such a big part of the franchise's legacy.
Okay.
We'll look at the actual events, the tragedies, but also like the pervasive belief that these films were somehow touched by something dark.
Right, where does the belief come from?
Yeah. So what really kickstarted all these whispers, the core of it seems to be this just unprecedented string of deaths,
Yeah.
right?
That's definitely the heart of it. I mean, the unexpected and often tragic deaths of several key actors, usually pretty soon after they were involved with the films, it just created this perfect storm for supernatural speculation.
So where do we start? The original film.
Yeah, let's start there. What's really striking is how quickly the tragedies began. Just months after the first film came out in 1982, Dominique Dunne, she played Dana, the older daughter.
Right, yeah.
She was murdered, just 22 years
Like
old.
Glad.
Yeah, November 1982. Her ex-boyfriend, Des Thomas Sweeney, strangled her. She died 5 days later.
That's horrible.
And the legal outcome was, well, deeply controversial. He got convicted of voluntary manslaughter, not murder.
Only voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah, and he only served about 3.5 years of a 6.5-year sentence. Her father, the writer Dominique Dunne, was obviously outraged. Many people saw it as a complete miscarriage of justice.
Well, I can imagine.
And, of course, the news, the tabloids, they covered it extensively. Her murder was brutal, and they immediately started drawing these sensational connections to the film that really fanned the flames of the whole curse idea right from the start.
So that was the first big one.
But then came the second one, which was arguably even more shocking, especially given who it was. Heather O'Rourke. Carol Ann.
The little girl. They're here.
Exactly. The absolute star of all three films. She died completely unexpectedly. February 1988. She was only 12.
12. How?
Well, Poltergeist III was in post-production. Initially, she'd been misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease. She was on cortisone treatments, which caused that facial swelling you see in the third movie.
Okay.
But then she collapsed at home. Cardiac arrest. She died during emergency surgery for what turned out to be an acute bowel obstruction. It was congenital stenosis, complicated by septic shock.
That's just heartbreaking. So
Right.
young.
It stunned everyone. The public, her co-stars were deeply affected. And again, the news reports immediately drew parallels to Dominique Dunne's death. People started asking, is there some malevolent force targeting the vulnerable ones in the cast?
Yeah.
It gave her line, "They're here," this incredibly tragic resonance. Still does, really.
Wow. That's just, it's heavy. And like you said, the sequels just seemed to keep it going, didn't they? Like the whispers just got louder.
They absolutely did. Poltergeist is second. The other side brought its own tragedies into the mix. Julian Beck, who played Reverend Kane, the really creepy old guy.
Unforgettable. Terrifying performance.
Well, he died of stomach cancer in September 1985. He was 60. This was actually before the film was released. He'd been diagnosed back in 83, and his appearance in the film, so gaunt and frail, that was the illness.
Right. I remember reading that. It made him even scarier.
It absolutely did, and it just fed right back into the curse narrative.
And there was another one from part 2, wasn't there? The actor who played Taylor.
Will Sampson, yes. He played the Native American shaman, Taylor, a really positive figure in the film. He died in June 1987. He was 53. It was from complications after a lung heart transplant. He suffered from scleroderma, a chronic systemic disease, and his body just couldn't handle the post-op recovery. Kidney failure.
Another complex medical situation, then.
Yes, but here's the crucial part with Sampson. He wasn't just an actor. He was a real-life shaman, a respected elder of the Muskogee Nation.
Oh, interesting.
And he reportedly, quite openly, performed an exorcism on the set of Poltergeist II.
Yeah, you had what?
An exorcism. To cleanse the filming location. He spoke about sensing a malevolent presence, actually called the set dirty.
Wow. Okay, that adds a whole new layer.
Exactly. And the news outlets, you can imagine, they seized on that. Here's a spiritual authority figure confirming something's wrong. It gave huge weight to the supernatural claims. So when he died, it felt like, well, like another piece of the puzzle. Maybe even like a consequence of him confronting whatever was there.
Man. Okay, so Dunne, O'Rourke, Beck, Samson. That's a lot for just 2 movies.
It is. And then, much later, another death seemed to kind of cement the curse for people who believed in it, extended its reach.
Who is that?
Lou Perryman. He had a pretty minor role in the original Poltergeist, played Pugsley.
Okay, vaguely remember the name.
Well, in 2009, decades later, he was murdered, brutally, hacked to death with an axe in his home by someone just released from prison.
Jesus. That's horrific.
Absolutely horrific. And even though it was so much later and seemingly unrelated, for believers, it was just more proof. The curse was still active.
It's such a grim list. And
Yep.
you can absolutely see, looking at it like this, how these individual tragedies, especially when they're violent or unexpected, how they could start to feel connected, especially tied to a horror film about disturbed spirits.
Exactly. It's like the human mind desperately wants to find a pattern, find a reason, especially for things that are so awful.
So that leads us to the sort of the why. Why did people believe it was a curse beyond just the number of deaths?
Right. It wasn't just the deaths themselves, but a few other things that really fueled the belief. First, like we said, the sheer concentration of misfortune. For many, it just seemed to defy normal probability. Too much bad luck in one place.
Okay.
Second, the victims. Particularly Dominique Dunne, 22, Heather O'Rourke, 12. Young, innocent. It mirrored the vulnerability of Carol Ann in the films. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. It felt targeted.
It felt targeted, maybe sinister. Third, the timing. Dunne's murder right after the first film. O'Rourke's death during post-production on the third. It felt less like coincidence, more like consequence. Retaliation, almost.
Like the film itself triggered something.
That was the feeling. And finally, just the unusual or gruesome circumstances we touched on, Samson's spiritual battle, Perriman's violent end. It all added to this deep sense of unease.
Okay, so we've got the tragic outcomes, but then there's the origin story, isn't there? The thing people point to as the reason for the curse.
Yes. This is where it gets really interesting and frankly pretty disturbing.
The skeletons.
The skeletons. The story, which turned out to be true, is that they used real human skeletons in the first film.
You kidding? Which scene?
The big climax. Jo Beth Williams' character, Diane, falls into the muddy pool pit, and all those skeletons pop up around her.
Those were real. Why?
Apparently, they were cheaper than making realistic prop skeletons at the
It was
time.
cheaper. Real human remains were cheaper.
That's the claim. It's just a profound act of disrespect, right? A violation of the sacred in so many cultures.
And the irony is just staggering.
Completely. The whole movie is about a family tormented because their house is on a desecrated burial ground. They disturbed the dead.
And the filmmakers literally did the same thing for a prop.
Exactly. A chilling, literal parallel.
Yeah.
Jo Beth Williams herself said years later when she found out they were real, she was horrified. She talked about feeling this inexplicable unease during those scenes, cold spots, just a sense that something was deeply wrong.
I bet. Knowing that now just makes that scene 10 times creepier. Was that like a normal thing back then, using real skeletons?
Well, maybe for super low budget stuff, but for a big Steven Spielberg production, it was definitely unusual.
Yeah.
Controversial. It points to this, I don't know, maybe overly pragmatic decision that just seems incredibly ill-advised given what the movie was about.
Yeah, no kidding. And it wasn't just the skeletons, right? Weren't there stories about weird stuff happening on set too? Paranormal activity.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of eyewitness accounts from cast and crew, things that went beyond just, technical glitches.
Like what?
Well, Oliver Robbins, the actor who played Robbie, the son,
Yeah.
he described this really harrowing experience with the clown doll in the first film.
Oh, God, that clown.
Right. During one take, the mechanical clown's arm supposedly malfunctioned and started to genuinely strangle him.
Why?
And he said it didn't feel like an accident. It felt, quote, deliberate and targeted.
Okay, that's terrifying. Did they have an explanation for that? Like, technically?
Officially, it was probably logged as a mechanical failure, sure.
Yeah.
But the feeling he described, that malicious intent, that's
Yeah.
what stuck with people.
I can imagine. What else?
Persistent reports of weird electrical stuff, lights flickering constantly, power outages that couldn't be explained, cameras jamming for no reason, sound equipment apparently picking up strange noises, growls, whispers, especially during the intense supernatural scenes.
Okay, that's classic ghost story stuff right there.
Totally. And stories of props just moving. vanishing from where they were secured, then turning up in weird places. Crew members reporting sudden cold spots, feeling like they were touched by something unseen, just a general sense of a presence.
And this ties back to Will Sampson too, right? His exorcism.
Exactly. You have him, a respected shaman, coming onto the set of the sequel and saying point blank, this place feels wrong, it's dirty, and then performing a cleansing ritual. That's a pretty powerful endorsement of the idea that something wasn't right. And apparently, things did calm down on set after he did it.
So you've got these physical incidents, the weird occurrences. What about the psychological impact? Did this stuff follow people home?
It seems like it did for some. The combination of the film's disturbing themes and these strange events, it definitely took a toll. There were reports of cast and crew having vivid, really unsettling nightmares that mirrored the movie's plot or even felt like premonitions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like the negativity kind of latched onto them. Many talked about just this constant background feeling of dread, anxiety, paranoia during production and even long after.
Any specific examples?
Little things, but creepy. Jo Beth Williams mentioned paintings tilting on the walls of her home every time she came back from set. Others mentioned weird electrical issues in their own houses. And James Caan, who wrote the novelization,
Yeah.
he claims he was struck by lightning while he was writing a storm scene for the book.
Okay, that's just bizarre. A lightning strike.
I mean, talk about a weird coincidence, right?
Yeah.
It all just adds to the overall unease surrounding the whole project.
So you have all this swirling around. What did the main figures, the director and producer, say about it all? Hooper and Spielberg.
Well, their public stances were generally pretty reserved, trying to downplay the curse aspect. Tobe Hooper, the credited director, mostly called the deaths tragic coincidences. He tended to focus on the filmmaking, the technical side. Of course, he also spent a lot of time dealing with those rumors that Spielberg actually directed most of it.
Right. That's a whole other controversy.
Exactly. Hooper was relatively quiet about the skeleton issue publicly, which you could interpret a few ways, but mostly he stuck to rational explanations.
And Spielberg, as the producer and co-writer, the big name.
Spielberg was also generally dismissive in his public comments. He called the deaths horribly tragic and awful, but insisted they had no relation to the events that took place on set in any supernatural way. He focused on the human grief, kept a professional distance from the curse talk.
But the skeleton decision happened under his watch, right?
Ultimately, yes. Even if it was a pragmatic choice made lower down the chain as the producer, that oversight links him to the potential trigger, as believers see it.
Okay, so bringing this all together,
Mm.
what does it mean for us now? Watching the movie today, why does Poltergeist still work so well, even after 40 years?
It really does hold up, doesn't it? I think there are a few key reasons. First, it's genuinely unsettling in a psychological way. It builds this atmosphere of dread, uses surreal imagery. It gets under your skin more than just relying on jump scares or gore.
True. It feels almost dreamlike sometimes, or nightmarish.
Exactly. And the family, the Freelings, they feel real. You believe in their dynamic, like that scene where the parents are casually smoking a joint in bed.
Yeah, they feel lived in, relatable.
Which makes the horror hitting them so much more impactful. You're invested.
And the effects
Yeah.
for 1982.
Still incredible, honestly. The practical effects, the warping room, floating stuff, the light phenomena, the face peeling scene, the skeletons in the pool, they have this visceral quality that still works.
They feel tangible.
And of course, Carol Ann's, they're here. It's iconic for a reason. That's the moment it clicks, the shift from weird stuff happening to full-on malevolent invasion.
Yeah, chills just thinking about it.
Plus, the film taps into deeper fears, doesn't it? Not just ghosts. Anxiety about consumerism, the power of television, the home being violated.
Yeah, the TV is the portal.
Right. And the rating always surprises people. It's PG technically, though later PG-13 standards might apply, but it's intense. It shows masterful direction and storytelling without needing excessive gore.
So here's the big question then. How does knowing all this backstory, knowing about the curse, change how you watch the movie?
Oh, it definitely changes it. For anyone aware of the real-life tragedies, the viewing experience gets amplified profoundly.
Amplified how?
Seeing Heather O'Rourke's innocent face, knowing her fate, or Dominique Dunne so vibrant in her role, knowing she was murdered months later, it adds this deeply unsettling layer.
It makes it feel almost meta-horrific.
That's a great way to put it. Like, the scares on screen were some kind of horrible prelude to real tragedy. People often say they feel this lingering unease after watching it, knowing the history. It goes beyond the credits. It feels like you've watched something actually touched by darkness.
Yeah. So wrapping this up, the Poltergeist Curse.
Hmm.
It's clearly not just some simple rumor someone cooked up. It's this whole narrative deeply woven into the film's legacy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fueled by this shocking series of real tragedies, the weird onset stories, and that incredibly controversial decision about the skeletons.
Absolutely. And the film itself is just so effective. It hits viewers so hard even today. You combine that power with the grim reality of what happened to some of the cast and those chilling production details. It ensures that the legend of the Poltergeist Curse stays captivating, stays unsettling, and honestly stays pretty mysterious, just like the movie.
Which leaves you with a final kind of provocative thought to mull over, doesn't it? Does the power of a story, especially a story dealing with the supernatural, actually have the ability to somehow manifest, to bleed into the real world? Or is it just our very human need to find patterns, to find meaning in awful events that transforms coincidence into something that feels much, much more sinister? It's definitely a chilling thought to consider the next time you glimpse something just a little bit off in your own home.